After a long weekend surrounded by relatives at our annual family get-together, I came back to my modest studio apartment in Brighton Hills, a small city just outside of Portland. The place was silent, a peaceful contrast to the chatter and noise of the reunion. I tossed my keys on the counter and kicked off my shoes, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle in. Everything seemed normal, until I opened my banking app to transfer money for the electricity bill. What I saw made my stomach twist. The screen flashed a balance of $83.52. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. Refreshed the app, still the same number. Just 2 days ago, that account had over $9,000. Now it was barely enough for a tank of gas. I could feel the blood drain from my face, like my body knew something awful before my mind could catch up. My heart thundered, my fingers shook. I called the bank immediately. After verifying my identity, the representative on the line said calmly, "All the charges were made using a previously recognized device, same IP address as one used before to log in. It seems local." Local? I froze. That meant the transactions came from my mother's house, the very place we'd just held the family reunion. My body moved before my brain could fully catch up. I grabbed my coat, keys, and drove through the quiet streets back to the house I grew up in, back to the place that still smelled like cinnamon and old wood floors, back to where trust used to live. I walked into the kitchen, the same one I used to sneak cookies in as a child. My hand reached for a glass of water from the cupboard, but everything inside me was trembling. "Back already?" came a light, breezy voice from the living room. It was Lena, my sister. She sat curled up on the couch, sipping red wine like this was any other Tuesday evening. Her tone was relaxed, her expression unreadable. "I just checked my account," I said, trying to keep my voice even, though it cracked at the edges. From behind the fridge appeared Trevor, my brother-in-law. He was holding a soda, leaning casually as if we were mid-conversation, a half smirk on his face. He shrugged. "We needed it more than you did, Mira." The world stilled. His words felt like a slap. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I was frozen in place, every part of me trying to make sense of what I had just heard. Lena gave a small laugh, sipping her wine. "Don't be so emotional," she said, almost lazily. "You've got a great job, no debt, no kids, you're doing fine." I turned to my mother, Rosa, who sat calmly in her armchair near the window, knitting like nothing unusual was happening. "Mom, did you know about this?" She didn't even look up. "You've always been a little sensitive, honey. You have more than enough. What's wrong with helping out family?" "Helping?" I turned to my dad, Franklin, who was buried in his phone as usual. He barely glanced up. "Don't turn this into a fight. It's just a family matter." My voice cracked. "But Erin, how did you even access my banking info?" Lena looked up, unfazed. "I used Mom's laptop. Your account was still logged in. You never signed out." She said it like it was my fault, like I had handed them the money willingly. I could feel my nails digging into my palms, my fists clenched so tightly my arms ached. Trevor simply added, "It's not like we splurged or anything. We used it for rent, groceries, we're barely getting by." I looked at each of them, not one apology, not even a hint of guilt. Just blank stares, justifications. "What did I do to deserve this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Lena rolled her eyes and said again, "You can earn it back. Don't be so dramatic." I picked up my purse. No one stopped me. No one asked if I was okay. Rosa only said, out of habit, "Don't forget Sunday dinner." I walked to the door, each step heavy, my chest hollow. I paused with my hand on the knob, then turned back. "If you think I'm going to just let this go," I said slowly, "wait and see what happens next." Lena snorted. "Honestly, Mira, you're so theatrical." "Don't be selfish. We needed it more than you." I didn't answer. I just stepped out into the rain. Inside me, something dark and unfamiliar stirred. A storm of realization, of betrayal, of the kind of pain that doesn't show up in bruises, but cuts deeper than any wound. I drove without thinking, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, the words still echoing in my head. "We needed it more than you." No remorse, no shame, no sense that anything wrong had happened. I didn't go home. I couldn't. Instead, I pulled into the empty parking lot near Lake Darrow, a quiet park where I usually went jogging on weekends. I turned off the engine and sat in silence. The banking app was still open on my phone. That cold number still glared back at me. 8352, just like Lena's eyes. I couldn't say I was shocked. Deep down, a part of me had always known this day might come. I had just hoped I'd be wrong. It had been nearly a year since I started working as a brand strategist at a mid-sized biotech firm in Brighton Hills. The role was demanding, but I loved the challenge. I was still getting used to the new rhythm of early mornings, late meetings, and figuring out how to be an adult in every sense of the word. Then one evening, my phone buzzed. It was Lena. "Hey, my phone got disconnected again. Could you send me a little something to cover the bill?" she asked, almost casually. I didn't hesitate. She was my sister, after all. A week later, Trevor reached out. He'd been jobless for more than half a year. "I just need a few hundred to get by till I hear back from that warehouse gig," he said. Again, I helped, quietly, willingly, because that's what you do for families, all, or so I thought. Then came Haley's birthday. Lena sent a gift list via text. The cheapest item on it was $210, a custom tablet case with the child's initials engraved. I stared at the list, stunned, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Before I could type anything, Rosa called. Her voice was soft, almost sugar-sweet. "You're not planning to skip your niece's birthday, are you? She's so excited about your gift. And you're doing well, aren't you? Better than the rest of us." And just like that, I gave in, again. Over time, it became automatic. Lena needed help with a down payment on a car. I chipped in. Trevor lost his wallet, said he was stranded. I wired money that night. Mom's power got cut off, and I dipped into my savings to cover the bill. Each time, they had a new reason. Each time, they reminded me, "You're the stable one." But not once did anyone ask, "Are you okay?" Not once. No one noticed the days I lived off ramen so I could send them money, the vacations I didn't take, the hobbies I never started. Just a few months ago, I declined a weekend getaway with my best friend because I had used the same money to help Trevor with rent. They said it like a compliment. "You're the one we count on." But it wasn't gratitude. It was expectation. Quiet, unspoken, heavy, and I had been carrying it alone. Rain was still falling when I turned the car radio on, hoping some soft music might drown the weight in my chest. But the ache remained. The kind of ache that comes when you realize you've been used not as a person, but as a solution, a credit card with a heartbeat. Just then, a message buzzed on my phone. It was from Rosa. "Lena told me you're upset about the money. Don't make this a big deal, sweetheart. We're family. Family." That word suddenly felt like a chain instead of a connection. I used to believe that if I just kept giving, my time, my money, my energy, they would one day appreciate it. Maybe even say thank you. But now I saw the truth. They never did, because they never saw me as someone who might need help. The one who never needs anything becomes the one expected to give everything. I took a deep breath and opened the Notes app on my phone. I began typing every payment, every late-night transfer, every birthday, every emergency, every call that started with, "Can I ask you something?" I didn't write it all down to ask for repayment. I wrote it down so I would never forget, so I would never put myself in this position again. Outside, the rain began to ease. A sliver of light peeked through the gray clouds. I placed my hands on the steering wheel and sat taller. I wasn't going to let this go. That night, back in my apartment, I replayed Trevor's words in my head. "We needed that money more than you. The arrogance, the entitlement, but worse, the indifference." That's what haunted me most. So the next morning, I called my bank again. I asked for a complete record of transactions from the past 10 days. When the file arrived, it was 17 pages long. I printed it, spread the pages across my table, and began highlighting every unfamiliar or suspicious charge in red. Then one line jumped out. A single transaction, $2,790, traced to an IP address from Rosa's house. That didn't make sense. Yes, I had checked my email there during the reunion, but my bank account? Never. Not once had I logged in there, which meant someone had accessed it behind my back, waited for the right time. That weekend, I returned to the house as if everything was normal. The kitchen still smelled of roast chicken and rosemary. The air, though, was tense, heavy in a way only truth can make it. Lena sat at the end of the dining table, eyes fixed on her plate. Trevor poured lemonade with too much ease, as if nothing was about to happen. I sat down and placed the printed reports on the table. I went through my account activity, I said calmly, and someone accessed my bank from this house. I was here that day, yes, but I didn't log in. So who did? Silence. Rosa kept her eyes on her salad like I had asked what time dinner would be ready. Franklin didn't look up from his newspaper. Only Lena spoke, voice quiet, sarcastic. You left it open. It's not like we hacked anything. I turned to her. So you admit it? She shrugged. It was just sitting there, you didn't lock it. And it's not like this is the first time you've helped us. But I didn't agree this time. Trevor placed his glass down with a click. You're always so dramatic. This isn't stealing, it's what family does and help each other. No, I said firmly. Helping is when someone asks and the other agrees. This was taking. Trevor placed his glass on the table with a faint clink, like we were just having a regular dinner conversation, not talking about theft. You're being dramatic again, he said, shaking his head. This isn't stealing, it's called supporting each other, it's family. No, I said, my voice clear and steady. Helping is when someone asks, and the other person agrees. This was taking without permission. That's when Rosa finally looked up from her plate, her voice soft, like she was explaining math to a child. Mira, sweetheart. You live alone. You've got a good job, no one depending on you. Lena's raising a child. Trevor's still getting on his feet. Family means sharing what we have. I stared at her, heart twisting. So sharing now meant draining my savings behind my back? My throat tightened, but not with anger, with pain. Then Franklin folded his newspaper. His jaw clenched like he'd just been asked to deal with something inconvenient. Don't make a scene. You've always been the strong one in this family. We all counted on you because we knew you could handle it. Trusted me? I let out a bitter laugh, stealing my personal banking info and emptying my account. That's what you call trust? Just call it what it is, taking advantage. Lena slammed her hand on the table, the first real flash of emotion she'd shown. We didn't blow it on vacations or shopping sprees, she snapped. It was rent, Haley's medication, car repairs. I'm exhausted, okay? You think you're the only one who's tired? I looked around the table, the people who had once meant safety and belonging. Now, all I saw were the people who kept asking more and more until I was nearly hollow. I was exhausted too, I said, my voice shaking. 60-hour weeks to help pay off your credit cards. That time, I canceled my trip just so Trevor wouldn't get evicted, eating instant noodles so I could help Mom keep the lights on. I took a deep breath. I've been tired for a long time, but I never said anything. I thought I was doing what was right. Silence. Even the clock on the kitchen wall seemed to tick louder. No one moved, no one offered an apology, not even a simple thank you. I reached into my purse, pulled out a folder. I paused at the door and turned toward Rosa. If this is how you treat the one person who never asked you for anything, then don't be surprised when she finally starts taking back what she's owed. Trevor chuckled dryly. What are you going to do, Mira? Call the cops on your own family? I stared at him, unwavering. Just wait and see. Then I walked out. For the first time, I didn't feel conflicted. I felt certain. Back at my apartment, dusk was settling over Brighton Hills, the sky a deep, smoky purple. The air felt thick, not from humidity, but from the fire still burning in my chest. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled out a worn file folder, the one I had quietly filled over the years. Receipts, screenshots, wire transfers, messages with vague promises and desperate pleas. Not because I was paranoid, because I knew, deep down, the day would come when I'd need proof that I wasn't crazy. I organized everything, from the $92.50 I paid for Lena's phone bill 3 years ago to the $200 I wired Trevor when he said it was urgent. I built a spreadsheet over the next 3 nights, logging every dollar that had left my account. Color-coded, green for medical, yellow for living expenses, red for everything that had no justification, like the $350 Trevor had spent on a gaming console during last year's Black Friday. I remembered that day clearly. I had skipped my winter company retreat just to make my insurance payment on time. On Monday morning, I walked into the downtown financial crimes office with the folder under one arm and a USB drive in my bag. I had already completed the complaint form. A young investigator named Officer Marin greeted me. She flipped through the paperwork slowly, nodding along. "This looks thorough," she said. "We'll begin with a preliminary investigation. Based on your details, we'll open the case under financial fraud and unauthorized access to personal banking. Do you have the names of the individuals involved?" "I do," I replied, handing over the list. Lena Walsh, Trevor Walsh, Rosa Alton, Franklin Alton. I walked out under gray skies, but something inside me had shifted. Not joy, not revenge, relief. Because for once I wasn't swallowing my pain for someone else's comfort. 2 weeks passed. It was a Thursday. I was halfway through a Zoom meeting at work when an unfamiliar number flashed across my phone. I excused myself and stepped out onto the balcony. "Mira? This is Officer Marin. We've finished our preliminary review. There's enough evidence to proceed. The Financial Investigation Unit will be visiting the identified residences today." I froze, not out of fear, but because someone finally saw what I'd been carrying all these years. That night, while I stirred a simple pasta dinner on the stove, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. First Rosa, then Lena, then Trevor. I didn't answer. Then came the texts, one after another, rapid and anxious. "Call your mother. What are you doing, Mira? Did you really call the police?" Still, I said nothing. An hour later, a message popped up from Mrs. Jennings, an old neighbor from the street I grew up on. "There are 3 people in jackets marked Financial Crimes Unit outside your mom's house. They asked about you too." I sat in stunned silence, phone resting in my hand. I hadn't imagined it. This was real, official, and for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. The next morning, I got to work early. As I stepped into the elevator, I caught a few sideways glances. Half curious, half cautious, the kind that made your skin crawl. When I stepped off on my floor, my manager, Carla, walked over. "We got a call from a local reporter," she said gently, placing a hand on my shoulder. "They asked to confirm a financial investigation linked to your name." We didn't say anything, of course. But Mira, if you need time, just let us know. I gave her a small, grateful smile. It's okay, I'm doing the right thing. That evening, I sat by my window, staring out at the glow of apartment lights across the city. Lena's voice still echoed in my mind. "This family only survives because of you. They did survive because of me. But they never saw me as a human being, not a sister, not a daughter, just an emergency fund with legs." I opened my journal and wrote a single line. "I am not the family bank. I am Mira." For the first time, my name wasn't tied to a payment, a bailout, or a rescue. Just me, just a person, and finally, a glimpse of freedom. The following Monday morning, while brushing my hair before work, my phone lit up. "Call me, Mom." I didn't open it. An hour later, as I poured my coffee, her voicemail came through. "Mira, this is going too far. I know there's been misunderstandings, but you don't have to take it this far. Can we please talk?" I set the mug down, a cold wave washing through me. Her voice hadn't changed, still gentle, still manipulative in its softness. By noon, Lena sent a long text. "My account's frozen. I can't pay Haley's tuition. I don't know what to do. You win, okay? Are you happy now?" Happy? As if this were a game, but I wasn't trying to win. I was just finally refusing to keep losing. The next day, Officer Marin called. "We've confirmed the amount withdrawn and misused," she said. "Lena is officially under investigation for unauthorized transfers. Trevor is linked to funds accessed from an unapproved device. And your parents..." Part of the money was used for an illegal mortgage adjustment. That may be subject to recovery. I sat in silence, not because I wanted them punished, but because even now, facing consequences, they still didn't seem to understand why this was happening. That night, Trevor tried calling. Repeatedly, I blocked the number. 10 minutes later, I got an email from a strange Gmail address. "Mira, please. I've been suspended from work. They're investigating my accounts. I can't lose everything over one mistake. Can't you just say something for me? Gone was the sarcasm, the smirks, the scoffing. In their place, panic. But I didn't flinch. Thursday morning, I got a rare message from Franklin. Bank sent foreclosure notice. We have 30 days or we lose the house. Just that. No apology, no acknowledgement of what they did. Just another silent expectation that I'd sweep in and fix it. That night, I stood by my window, watching the street below blur through the city lights, and I remembered the countless nights I'd skipped meals to wire Rosa money, the movie nights I missed because Lena needed me, the quiet way I let my own life shrink so theirs wouldn't fall apart. I had given them not just my money but my peace, and this time I wasn't going back. That weekend, I drove toward Saltford Bay, the quiet little shoreline where my dad and I used to fish during summer breaks. No one knew I was there. No one had asked how I was doing anyway. The same people who once called me their lifeline now only called to salvage their consequences. Late that afternoon, my phone lit up again. Another message from Rosa. Mira, I'm begging you. I know I was wrong. But if we lose the house, I don't know how I'll survive. Please don't abandon me. I stared at the screen for a long time. And the pain I felt wasn't guilt. It was the realization that even now, she was thinking about the house, not about me. Not once did she ask if I was okay. I locked my phone, tucked it into my coat pocket, and stepped onto the sand. The wind rushed over the bay, cool and steady, and something inside me, something long buried, started to feel light again. This was the hard part, the part where they'd call me cold, heartless, ungrateful. But it was also the part where I stopped carrying what was never mine to hold. The wind off Saltford Bay had carried something away with it, not just the anger, but the invisible weight I'd been shouldering for years. And when I drove back to my apartment, I knew I wasn't going to stay. 3 weeks later, without announcing it to anyone, I submitted a request for an extended leave of absence from work. Then I rented a car, packed my belongings into carefully labeled boxes, and left Brighton Hills under a sky so gray it looked like a farewell in itself. I didn't tell Rosa, or Lena, or anyone really. I simply left, like I was peeling away the skin of a past self, one that had been smothered under the expectations of being the dependable one. Hours later, I arrived in Ashwell, a quiet town tucked into the mountain foothills of northern Colorado. A place I had visited only once years ago on a rushed business trip. Back then, I had just enough time to sip coffee in a softly lit cafe, its walls humming with gentle jazz and conversation. That short moment of calm had never quite left my memory, and now it was where I chose to begin again. I rented a small studio with clean white walls and tall windows that caught the morning sun just right. The air smelled of pine and possibility. Within days, I filled the space with tiny pieces of joy, vases of wildflowers, a new writing desk, and shelves lined with books I'd been meaning to read for years. There were no piles of unopened bills that weren't mine, no borrowed things that were never returned, no one to make space for but me. I changed my number. Let my company know I'd be working remotely for an indefinite period. And almost like magic, the fatigue that had followed me like a second shadow began to lift. I slept, really slept, for the first time in months. I ate when I was hungry instead of when I had time. And slowly, I started feeling like someone I hadn't seen in a long time, myself. Just 2 weeks after settling in, my phone rang. It was Julian, my regional director. Mira, he said, his voice upbeat. I just finished reviewing your latest strategy draft, and I have to say it's brilliant. Have you ever considered stepping into the regional coordinator role for the Western Division? For a second, I couldn't speak. A year ago, I would have said no. I would have been too busy worrying about Rosa's overdue bills, Trevor's latest excuse, or whether Lena would guilt me over not sending money for Haley's school fees. But now? I looked out my window, where light spilled across a forest of evergreens, and smiled. I'm ready, I said. Julian chuckled. I knew you would be. Congratulations, Mira. After the call, I wrapped myself in a knitted blanket, brewed a cup of herbal tea, and sat on my balcony. The air was cool and sweet, the breeze gentle as it brushed my hair back from my face. For the first time in a long time, there was no noise, no desperate voicemails, no texts that started with, "Can I ask you something?" Just calm. And every message that did arrive came from people who asked how I was feeling, not what I could do for them. Former colleagues, yoga classmates, a few neighbors, people who didn't see me as a resource, people who saw me. I hadn't just gained peace, I had reclaimed my identity. One afternoon, I wandered back to the little cafe I'd fallen in love with years ago, the one with the worn leather chairs and golden lighting. I sat by the same window, sipping coffee from the same ceramic mugs. The barista looked at me thoughtfully. "You've been here before, haven't you? You were the one who asked me about that jazz track we were playing?" I smiled. "Yeah, that was me. And now, I live here." He nodded slowly, then gestured to the window. "This town, it heals a lot of people." I didn't need to say anything, just nodded again, quietly agreeing. That night, I wrote in my journal. I spent years standing guard at a door, hoping my family would step through and see me, not what I could give, but who I really was. But they never came to see me, they only came to take. Now the door is closed and the key belongs to me. This life wasn't flashy. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic apologies. Just silence, and the kind of freedom that grows quietly. I didn't know what the future held. Maybe Lena would call one day with a different tone in her voice. Maybe Rosa would finally understand. Maybe not. But I knew one thing with certainty. I wasn't going back. Not because I didn't love them, but because for the first time, I had chosen to love myself more. Then one crisp fall morning, as I watered the small row of potted herbs on my balcony, my phone pinged. I didn't check it right away. I finished watering the basil and mint, made a cup of tea, and curled into the chair by the window. When I finally opened my inbox, I paused. The subject line read, "Thank you, Mira." The sender's name took me a moment to recognize. Melanie Shore. She was a distant cousin, someone I'd only met twice at family gatherings. Quiet, always helping, never saying much, and yet she had found my email. I stared at the screen, not immediately recognizing the name, Melanie Shore. The subject line was simple. "Thank you, Mira." Curiosity pulled me in. I opened the message. "You might not remember me. I'm Melanie, Aunt Grace's daughter. We met a couple of times at family events. Once, Lena asked me to babysit Haley, and you gave me a ride home after her birthday party. You probably don't remember that either, but I do. I stayed quiet for years, thinking I had no right to speak. But when I heard what you did, how you finally said enough, I couldn't stay silent anymore. I blinked, frozen in place. Each word felt like it rippled through the stillness inside me, like someone had gently dropped a pebble into the quiet pond of my chest. "My family's like yours," Melanie wrote. "They called me lucky, so I had to give. I've worked 3 jobs at once. Still, I was expected to send money home. For my mom, for my brother. The few times I said I couldn't, they called me selfish, dramatic, ungrateful." I read her words slowly, carefully, like each one deserved its own breath. She went on. "But what you did, it showed me there's another way. That saying no isn't cruel. It's how we protect the parts of ourselves we never should have had to give away." My hands were wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Outside, golden leaves skated across the balcony in the wind, landing softly on the railing like tiny notes from the universe whispering you're not alone. Inside, something subtle shifted. It wasn't pride, and it wasn't revenge. It was something else entirely, the quiet relief of being understood, of finally being seen. Melanie wasn't the first to reach out. A few weeks earlier, a college friend had messaged me after stumbling on a blog post I had published anonymously. "I used to think you were just unshakably strong," she wrote. "But now I understand. You were holding everything together because no one else did." I see that now. That line, "I see that now," echoed louder than I expected. Because for years I had stayed silent, afraid that even talking about how tired I was would make me the villain in a story where I was always expected to be the savior. No one had taught me that kindness wasn't supposed to come with self-erasure. That night, I sat at my desk and drafted a reply to Melanie. You don't know how much your message meant to me. I never imagined that my choice, something so painful and personal, might light a path for someone else. Thank you for the courage to share your truth with me. You're not wrong for needing boundaries. You're not selfish for wanting to breathe. You're just learning to love yourself properly, and that's something you never have to apologize for. I hit send, and in that instant, something inside me crystallized. I hadn't lost my family. I had redefined what that word meant. Family wasn't just about bloodlines or shared holidays. It was about people who respected your no as much as they welcomed your yes. People who didn't confuse love with access or support with submission. The next morning, I opened the curtains to find sunlight streaming through the windows, casting golden stripes across the floor. There was no heaviness in my chest. No dread. I wasn't Mira, the one who always gave in. I was Mira, the woman who learned when to say, "This ends here," and I wasn't alone in that transformation. Out there, people like Melanie were finding the strength to stop apologizing for protecting their peace. If my choice had lit even the smallest corner of someone else's darkness, then everything I endured had been worth it. That Sunday afternoon, I wandered down the winding cobblestone path just a few blocks from my apartment. The park was alive with color, trees shedding summer's green in exchange for golden and copper tones. A little girl pedaled by on a pink bike, her mother chasing behind her, laughing and shouting, "Slow down, sweetie." I paused, coffee in hand, watching them, the joy, the weightlessness. It stirred something old in me, a softness I hadn't felt in years. There was a time when I lived solely for approval, saving every cent, saying yes to every request, burying my own wants under the need to be the good daughter. All for a nod from Rosa, a reluctant smile from Lena, a rare thank you from Franklin. But none of them ever asked the one question I'd needed most. "Are you okay?" They only needed me to be strong, to hold their burdens, and when I stopped, they called me ungrateful. And for a while, I believed them. But now, standing in this small mountain town, among strangers who smiled at me with no hidden agenda, I finally understood something deeply simple. I didn't need to earn love through sacrifice. I didn't need to lose myself to belong. And I didn't have to stay small so others could feel comfortable. There was a time when saying no felt like betrayal. Like I was walking away from everything I'd ever known, from people whose approval I'd spent years trying to earn. But now, I knew better. I hadn't betrayed anyone. I had simply stopped betraying myself. In the weeks that followed, my life didn't explode into something glamorous or groundbreaking. There were no viral moments, no celebratory toasts under string lights, just small, quiet days stitched together with intention. And that was more than enough. I started doing the things I once thought were luxuries, not big things, little ones that brought me back to myself. I woke early and learned how to make real breakfast, not energy bars eaten in the car. I wandered through weekend farmers markets in Ashwell, letting myself linger by fresh flowers and hand-poured candles. I joined a local pottery group, my fingers sinking into clay like I was rewriting the foundation of who I was. For once, my decisions weren't based on who needed what from me. They were based on what made me feel alive. One afternoon, while I was rearranging a bookshelf, a small envelope slid through the mail slot. The handwriting on the front was familiar, elegant. Inside was a postcard, glossy and warm, the image of a sunlit courtyard in Rome. It was from Callie, a colleague from 2 jobs ago. We hadn't spoken in years. On the back, she had written, "Mira. Watching you set boundaries taught me something I never had the courage to admit out loud. I didn't need permission to change my life. Because of you, I finally moved to Rome. I've wanted this since I was 20. I just never believed I was allowed. Thank you for showing me that I was." I sat down at my desk, holding the card gently between my fingers. There, next to the postcard, were other little keepsakes that now felt like sacred parts of my healing. A polished stone I found during my first solo hike, a tiny jar of lavender I dried myself, and my old leather-bound journal, now nearly full. None of these things cost much, but they were mine, symbols of a life not built on obligation but choice. I no longer held my breath every time my phone buzzed. I no longer looked for Rosa's name in my inbox. I no longer dreamed of apologies that never came. Maybe someday they'd understand why I stepped away, or maybe they never would. Either way, I wasn't waiting anymore. Some truths don't need to be explained to the people who never tried to understand them in the first place. There's a certain kind of love we're taught to chase, the kind that asks us to give even when it hurts, the kind that disguises sacrifice as loyalty, but real love doesn't ask us to disappear to make others comfortable. Real love says, I see you, you matter, even when you say no. I finally saw that, not just in others, but in myself. The Mira I used to be would have clung to the crumbling ruins of family loyalty, terrified that letting go meant failure. She would have kept pouring from an empty cup, smiling through exhaustion, convincing herself that endurance was virtue. But that Mira is gone. The woman who stands in her place now? She's not harder. She's not bitter. She's simply clear. Clear about what she deserves. Clear about what she'll no longer tolerate. Clear about what kind of life she's building. One moment, one choice at a time. A few days later, as I was walking the trail near the ridge behind my apartment, I passed an older woman sitting on a bench. Her dog was curled at her feet, and she was sipping coffee from a thermos. She looked up and smiled. "You look peaceful," she said simply. And I smiled back because I was. It wasn't the absence of problems that made me feel free. It was the absence of expectations I never agreed to. That night, I lit a candle, made a bowl of homemade risotto, and sat by the window as dusk rolled in over the mountains. I thought about how far I'd come, not in distance, but in dignity. And for the first time, I wrote in my journal, not from pain or anger or heartbreak, but from peace. You don't owe anyone your burnout just to prove you care. You don't need to be the family hero to be worthy of love. You're allowed to walk away from anything that steals your joy. This wasn't a story about revenge. It was a story about release, about stepping away from the noise to hear your own voice again, about realizing that sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is stop trying to be everything for everyone and start being everything for yourself. Because when you stop giving people permission to chip away at you piece by piece, you finally begin to rebuild yourself, whole.